Welcome to this GSA Momentum Discussion webinar titled Bringing Home Breakthrough Alzheimer's Treatment, Anti-Amyloid Therapy in Rural Communities. This is the third of a series of 3 webinars focusing on different aspects of delivering amyloid targeting monoclonal antibodies for the treatment of early symptomatic Alzheimer's disease. The series is developed by the Gerontological Society of America, or GSA, in collaboration with the Alzheimer's Association, with support from Lilly. My name is Jen Pettis, and I'm pleased to serve as the moderator for today's session. Before introducing our panelists, I'd like to share a few housekeeping items. Please type your questions in the Q&A box at any time during the webinar. We'll have a question and answer session in the last few minutes of our program. Our program is being recorded today and will be available on demand on GSA Enrich by the end of the day. Your feedback is important to us. Please complete the evaluation in GSA Enrich following the webinar. I'm delighted to introduce our guest panelist today. Dr. Kara Leahy is the Director of Cognitive Disorders at the Memorial Healthcare Institute for Neuroscience in Owasso, Michigan. She's recognized for her leadership in Alzheimer's disease diagnosis, treatment, and active roles in clinical practice and research. Her clinical and academic interests center on integration of biomarker-based diagnostics into community and specialty neurology settings. Dr. Leahy completed her neurology residence at Michigan State University and has held faculty appointments at Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine and Central Michigan University College in, Central Michigan University College of Medicine. She was named an Outstanding Educator of the Year in 2024 and has presented at national and institutional forums, including the Alzheimer's Association International Conference, American Academy of Neurology, and the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference. Dr. Leahy has led initiatives to advance early diagnosis and care for patients with Alzheimer's disease. Her work bridges clinical innovation, research, and compassionate care for patients with cognitive disorders. And Dr. Cliff Singer is a psychiatrist and geriatrician. He's the medical director of the Memory and Aging Program at Northern Light Acadia Hospital in Bangor, Maine, and research professor at the University of Maine Institute of Medicine. He's received numerous awards for teaching, research, and clinical work with older adults and persons with dementia in both Oregon and Maine, and has been selected by peers to Best Doctors in America every year since 2004. Thank you, Dr. Singer and Dr. Leahy, for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting us, Jennifer.
Well, before I get us started with today's discussion, I want to highlight that GSA has a significant number of freely available brain health resources, including our flagship brain health resource, the GSA Care Toolkit for Brain Health. These resources are available on our website at geron.org/brainhealth and at carebrain.org. Today's topic is close to the hearts of many. We're talking about expanding access to anti-amyloid therapies for Alzheimer's disease. Specifically today, we discuss how to bring these exciting treatments to individuals in rural communities. I'm thrilled to speak with 2 experts who are doing just that and hear about the innovation, patient-centered models of care that you all are implementing. Dr. Singer and Dr. Leahy, thanks again for your willingness to join us and participate in this discussion. And Dr. Singer, to start us off, would you please share with our audience a little about your community and your practice?
Sure. We're a 9-hospital system called Northern Light Health, and we have about 40 plus primary care sites with statewide reach. My program is the Memory and Aging Program, which I started when I was recruited here 15 years ago. One of our programs is the Mood and Memory Clinic, which provides dementia consultation and care for our system and region. We have a geriatric psychiatrist, a neuropsychiatrist, 2 neuropsychologists, 2 nurse practitioners, 2 nurses, 3 research coordinators, and we're the only site in Maine doing Alzheimer's disease clinical trials. or clinical research, and we're the only one in our region doing anti-amyloid therapy.
Thank you. Dr. Leahy, the same question for you. Would you tell us a bit about your community and your practice?
Sure. Happy to be here today. Excited to be a part of this webinar. First of all, thank you for inviting us. I am a neurologist at a 150-bed community-based hospital. As part of a relatively small healthcare system, we actually have a relatively large neurology clinic with 20 practitioners, part of that clinic. Although there are 20 providers in our clinic, I'm the only one that's doing Alzheimer's and dementia care. And I started doing that about 10 years when I came to Memorial Healthcare. And because it was an unmet need, there was a practice that was growing of neurologists, but there wasn't anyone taking the corner of neurology that was neurodegenerative diseases. And I thought, well, that's an exciting field, thinking about maybe what could be potentially coming in the years during my career, and decided that I would start to do that. So I've been very lucky in that a few years later, we did start to get to see some hope as we watch some of these anti-amyloid therapies come through the research pipeline. I think that, what was exciting about coming to a rural community, I grew up in a rural community. I thought as a specialist, I might not be able to practice in a rural community. Maybe I had to be in a larger city, and was excited to come and to work in a community and be a part of that community, the same community that I work in.
Perfect. Dr. Leahy, why was it so important to you to make these anti-amyloid therapies for Alzheimer's available in that community?
Well, I think that it kind of piggybacks off of that. When you work in the community that you live and in a relatively small town, you know your community members, right? These are the people that you're seeing at your kids' soccer games and as you go into your grocery store, right? It's not just people, but these are the people you know, or the people that you know who know someone else. And I wanted to make sure that the people I care about in this community, my friends and my family members, had access to all the available treatments. And I think that that's when you're dealing with a chronic illness or terminal illness like Alzheimer's. As a family member, you want to be able to say that you tried everything, or that you thought of everything that could be done for your loved one, and there wasn't something that you missed. And I think that all communities should have access to that. It doesn't mean just because you're not in a big city, doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to also say that when you're taking care of your loved one.
That's great. Dr. Singer, what are some of the most important first steps to creating a treatment pathway in a rural health system?
Oh boy. Well, you need to create a team. It's not something you can do by yourself. At the very least, a nurse or a dementia care coordinator to help with assessments, monitoring the MRI safety schedule, for monitoring for amyloid-related imaging abnormalities, which is the major concern with these treatments, entering data into the required registries, communicating with the infusion center for disease education, medication education. That's helpful. And establishing a protocol for creating the orders for the infusions and communicating around adverse reactions. Possibly meeting with the local emergency room staff because people could potentially be presenting with stroke-like symptoms. And there are certain medications, thrombolytic drugs, for example, if people are having an ischemic stroke or a heart attack that they may receive and they're not supposed to get those drugs. So some good communication with emergency departments is helpful. And then communicating with primary care providers to know that this treatment is available.
Great. You mentioned some important changes in personnel and some training opportunities and partnerships that you developed there, but were there any other kind of infrastructure issues that you had to address in order to put in place the opportunity to deliver these treatments safely and efficiently in your community?
Yeah, it takes some organizing. We were lucky that we already had the infrastructure for clinical trials, which is very helpful, I think, for monitoring these treatments. So to keep track of patient eligibility and safety monitoring. We run our program like a clinical trial, and I know that's not possible for some people. We had the advantage of having a research coordinator available for data entry into the ALZNet registry, which is the registry co-sponsored by the Alzheimer's Association and the American College of Radiology. To administer these drugs, people have to be entered into either the Medicare or CMS registry or the ALZNet registry. We use the ALZNet registry because it helps us structure our program like a clinical trial. The RN I work with is also experienced with clinical trials and functions as the care coordinator for our program. The partnership with pharmacists and nurses at our infusion programs is also key. And they help us keep track of the MRI scheduling. We only have one neuroradiologist here, though, and that's one of the downsides of our program. Even though we're a large health system, we are in a remote and rural setting. So it's hard to recruit radiologists. There's about a 2-week turnaround. So my colleague, Dr. Otis, and I have had to become skilled at reading MRIs, looking for ARIA for safety monitoring while we wait for the official reads. So that's one of the things you have to be prepared to be self-sufficient with in a rural setting if you don't have rapid turnaround times for reading brain scans.
Thank you. Dr. Leahy, I understand that you had a medical assistant in your program that was elevated to the position of a brain health navigator. What are some of their key functions, and what preparation was needed to allow them to serve effectively in that role?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to have a medical assistant in the years prior to anti-amyloids being approved that had a lot of experience. And she had more than 20 years experience working as a medical assistant in primary care before coming to our neurology clinic. She worked as a medical assistant alongside me for a couple of years and was the obvious choice then for someone to kind of take over this role. And she has been a big part of the success, the reason for success in our clinic is to have someone that not only understands the medications, but also understands the people, the patients, and how to communicate with them. We have now added a second, actually, brain health navigator, and to kind of take on some of the growing amount of patients that we have on anti-amyloid therapies. One of the things so the medical assistant started working with me as a medical assistant, and then when she transferred to that new role, she saw patients with me for a few weeks and started to hear the way that I answer questions or the way I formulate or some of the ways that I explain some of the things to the patients. So she could be mirroring that same kind of language or phrases then when she was talking to patients. And another relatively simple thing, but I think that was really helpful, was that she, for about the first year, actually was in my office. So we were able to communicate and talk about patients that I was seeing during the day or that she was getting phone calls for. And also some of the new advances was, as we said, something changes in Alzheimer's treatment almost every week. So to keep updated on those kind of changes, and also for her to kind of help to guide me as to what would be an appropriate thing for her to handle with a patient and what was something that I should be handling with patients. So we've kind of worked through that, and I think it's a really great system. And I think that if practices have a medical assistant, one of the medical assistants that they feel has the most experience and has good rapport with patients, that would be the ideal candidate to look into someone taking on an additional role.
Terrific. And I have just a follow-up question for both of you related to this idea of coordinator or navigator. You mentioned a couple of qualities about what makes that person really good, but if you had to summarize, if you were putting an ad in the newspaper for what makes that great coordinator, what would be a few things you would each mention for that person?
I would say that you're looking for someone that likes people. right? I think that's a lot about it. Before anti-amyloid therapies came about, we used to say in our clinic that the talk is the treatment, that talking to patients and helping them and supporting them was the treatment. It still is. There's something else we're also talking about, but it's the support. So you're looking for someone that just has really great people skills. The rest, is something that we can help teach and that they can learn as equal to us. And the medical assistant that is now our navigator knows as much about Alzheimer's as I do. But that's been something that we've been working on and learning really together for several years now.
That's a great answer. I really like that. For me, personally, I lack organizational skills. So I need somebody with organizational skills.
Okay, great answers. Dr. Singer, you shared with me that you use CPT code 96116, the code for neurobehavioral status evaluation that allows you to be reimbursed for your time reviewing test results and conducting that consent visit. What documentation is required to support the use of that code?
Yeah, so let me just start by saying when we began this program, I realized it was taking a fair amount of time, and we would try, and it was also taking away some clinic time and away from another project that a grant-funded project. So I had to figure out a way to get reimbursed for some of that time. And in our clinic, this CPT code 96116, which is a neuropsychological assessment code for up to an hour of testing, 30 to 60 minutes of testing, seemed to work because it reimburses time to document history, labs, including genetic testing, and imaging and biomarkers, review to confirm eligibility and confirm Alzheimer's pathology. And it requires documentation of exam, specifically including elements of cognitive testing. You need to document memory, reasoning, visual, spatial, and executive functions. And it can be added to an E&M code on the same day. And reimbursement varies from site to site, state to state. We get good reimbursement for this code. I think partly because we're a hospital-based clinic, so I think it varies from place to place, but it's at least something to investigate. It might bring in a little more reimbursement to allow you to do some of the documentation and really case review, that detailed case review and consultation that's required, particularly if the person is not a patient you've been following. If you do this kind of treatment, you're going to get referrals specifically for this treatment, and you have to take the time to get to know the patient and the family and discuss the risk and potential benefits. There is a long informed consent procedure that we do. So it's something that you do need to explore, different billing codes for it. And 96116 is one possibility to, at least as an add-on.
Great, thank you. You kind of set up my next question pretty darn nice, which is talking about referrals. Each of you are a rare commodity, so to speak, delivering these anti-amyloid therapies for Alzheimer's disease in your community. And with that, I suspect you receive a lot of referrals. So I'd appreciate both of your perspectives on what strategies have been effective in identifying the eligible patients and how you engage with primary care in that kind of diagnostic and referral process to help really optimize that pipeline. And Dr. Leahy, I'll start with you.
Well, first I would say this is something that we're still working on, and I don't have it completely figured out. We're constantly trying different things. I think initially just a letter to the referring primary care doctor's offices and just saying that if you have completed or patient has completed an MRI, these labs or cognitive screening test in your office, please make sure to send that so that we know that as part of the referral. And for a while, we said that we would be able to triage patients if they had those tests already done to sooner appointments. I think that what we found was that was a very complicated process of triaging, and sometimes we were waiting a long time to get additional testing back from primary care doctors. So we kind of sort of failed on that front, I would say. But what we also are starting to implement now are new patient slots for patients with MCI or mild dementia. And we have more of those available appointments than appointments for patients in later stages, which will get patients in sooner that are anti-amyloid candidates. We're also looking to expand general neurology to also care for patients in later stages, because obviously they need to be cared for as well, but kind of subdividing this out and making sure that we're getting those patients that are early on. Right now, we have a 9-month wait, and we know that if someone is in mild dementia, 9 months later, they might not qualify for anti-amyloid therapies. And I've sat in enough of those appointments that are really terrible appointments to have to tell someone that they didn't qualify for anti-amyloid therapies. And I also know they waited 9 months to see me. So we have to fix that, and we're working on that with these different kinds of appointment times. I've heard other clinics talk about it as like an MCI clinic versus a dementia clinic, and kind of dividing out that way, and then able to get people in a little bit sooner. But like I said to begin with, it's something we're still trying, and it's a trial and error process to help and to also engage those primary cares. Although I think that that is really improving, the end here of 2025 versus the beginning of 2025. I think that message is starting to really get to the primary care doctors that these additional testing before referral can be really beneficial at that first appointment, kind of elevating that first appointment to talking really about, does this person have Alzheimer's? Are we doing testing for amyloid pathology or not?
Perfect. And Dr. Singer, the same question for you.
Yeah, I think I really like those strategies that Dr. Leahy mentioned. One advantage of being in a rural area is not hard to get on the news and not hard to get an article in the newspaper. So public outreach efforts can make a difference. Going to medical staff meetings can make a difference. We are lucky, fortunate enough to have a large federal grant, a HRSA grant, to improve dementia care in our state of Maine. And we did 2 large conferences for primary care and other specialty education. So we were able to talk people through clinical practice guidelines and biomarkers and treating different syndromes within dementia. So that elevated people's knowledge and skills. We have a monthly case conference, which operates almost like a statewide tumor board, where people can present cases and we can talk them through diagnostic, suggested diagnostics and biomarker interpretation. Our labs here, and I think probably all over the country, are promoting biomarkers, blood-based biomarkers, to primary care providers. So this is a real opportunity because they need to know the who, what, why, and what happens next of blood-based biomarkers. These are really complex discussions to have with patients and families. And so that creates, if they're being, if they're receiving promotional materials for blood-based biomarkers, I mean, that's an opportunity for outreach and education. Our grant is also allowing us to train dementia champions in several of our primary care clinics. So there are multiple strategies for outreach and education.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the primary care dementia champion? Can you tell us a bit about what that role looks like?
Yeah, so our grant allowed us to buy MOCA training for 50 people in our system. So we've We promoted that, and people have stepped up and said, I want to go through that. It's an hour-long training so that we can standardize and raise the level of expertise for that for using the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, how to administer it in a standardized way, basic interpretation. It's the second step in our clinical pathway. We use the mini cog and the AD8 as the screening measures, and then MoCA as a secondary measure. But we're promoting to primary care practices with support of leadership in primary care to identify people within different practices to get the MoCA training and to help the providers with doing the screening and the secondary level of assessment. And then our care pathway allows people to make decisions about whether this is a person who can stay within primary care or needs to go to neurology, needs to go to neuropsychology, needs to go to geriatric or neuropsychiatry, needs to go to geriatric medicine. So we have specific recommendations for those pathways that I can share that with attendees on the call too.
Great.
That's been helpful. But having someone within a primary care practice is really to keep that practice organized and up to date is important. It's usually an MA or a nurse.
Terrific. That's great. Dr. Leahy, when we chatted the other day, you mentioned some unique factors that patients who may benefit from anti-amyloid therapies and their care partners who live in rural areas need to consider. What are some of those factors, and how do you integrate them into shared decision-making about whether these treatments are right for them?
Yeah, the shared decision making, of course, as a physician, it's a lot about the medications, the potential side effects, and the clinical trials themselves, the risks of them. But I think that that part is, sort of go through that in this big stream of information. But at the end of that, when I'm done talking about options for therapy and the anti-amyloid therapies, there's this kind of pause in the discussion where you start to sort of read how the patient is relating to this. And there's usually between caregiver or family members a discussion of if this is right for them. And one of the things, of course, in a rural setting that you hear is how would we even get mom to an infusion center? And how far away would we have to go for that? So there's a discussion of, okay, I live here in Michigan, what's the closest infusion center? What would be the transportation like? What kind of supervision might she need after the first treatment, after the second treatment? So we have referrals from 2-3 hours away. And that is a commitment, certainly when we're talking about the therapies. And also just, are there family members around that can support them on the therapy? As I say, these treatments are a lot of everything. Appointments, MRIs, and risks in that they need to be have some support from family to make sure that they're relaying any kind of symptoms or concerns to our office as well. So I think that distance is a big discussion after we have that initial discussion about the science of it. It's how would we make this work for you, and how does that play then into the decision if it's right for you?
Dr. Singer, anything you wanted to add about other factors that you encourage patients to consider as they decide to receive these therapies?
Yeah, all those factors that are important in Michigan are the same here. I would also add that snowbirding is a big factor. How to arrange treatment when people go to Florida or Arizona for a few months over the winter. That's a challenge. And when people don't want to travel 2 or 3 hours to come to an infusion center, are you able and willing to work with an infusion center closer to home, educate their staff, and then deal with the issues around using another MRI scanner? Are you going to require people to come to your center for their brain scans so that you get at least continuity between machines, which is important? In the beginning, I do a detailed informed consent process so that people really understand the risk and the potential benefits. And is slowing the rate of decline worth the risk, expense, and inconvenience for this person? and his or her family. So you have to assess their motivation as well as the appropriateness of treating in terms of their comorbid diagnoses. Is it just Alzheimer's disease, or is it something else that's going to diminish the efficacy of the treatment because it's going to run its own course? And what stage they are. Is it already too advanced? As Dr. Leahy said, it's very disappointing for us and to patients and families when we have to make a judgment that it's just too late to really benefit. So all these things need to be discussed.
Thank you. Well, thanks for such great information, and it's really talking to you. I'm inspired by the dedication that both of you have, and so community focused. It's terrific. But I want to ask you one more question for both of you before we go to some audience questions, and that is, looking ahead, what gives you hope when it comes to expanding access to breakthrough Alzheimer's treatment or therapies in rural communities? So what gives you hope as we look ahead? Dr. Leahy, why don't you get started?
Well, in a rural community, in a small town kind of setting, there's a lot of word of mouth and things. And I think that what I see these anti-amyloid therapies really taking off and really expanding access is because people want options. And as I had mentioned at the very beginning, they want the same options in a small town as someone who lives in a big city. And they want that for their loved one, and they want that for themselves. And what I hear is, right, and Dr. Singer probably has the same thing. Oh, I heard your name from my Aunt Betsy, who heard your name from this person, right? And it's because there's a buzz, right? When you have something, if you have a terminal illness, then all of a sudden has treatments that can give people hope, but give people more time. People want those. And that spreads. It spreads among our population, our community, and we're seeing the effects of that in our community as well, and how powerful that is. And it's a privilege to be a part of it. It's a privilege to be a part of Alzheimer's treatment right now as we see the developments that are happening in this illness. So, I think that I'm hopeful in that I see that people are starting to learn about these medications through events like this as well, or listening to the local news if we're on it, as Dr. Singer said. And they themselves are asking these questions to their primary care doctors and their physicians, that I would like to learn about that too. I would like to also see if I was a candidate for that treatment as well. And that's how they're ultimately going to expand, and we're going to have access for all people with these treatments.
Dr. Singer, the same question for you.
Yeah, I love those points that you made. I would say that it is very exciting. We're at the beginning of a new era, really, sometimes called the era of personalized or precision medicine. It's been oncology and cancer care has been at this stage for the last couple of decades. We're just taking our first dip in that water with Alzheimer's disease. I'm hopeful that new disease-modifying treatments will be available that will require different types of tests, different kinds of monitoring, but these treatments will have a bigger impact. I don't think they're too far away in the future. We're going to be seeing the same kinds of things happening with Parkinson's disease and Lewy body disease and ALS. It's really an exciting time. But we need to realize that people in rural areas want to get care closer to home, and how we keep up with the science and give access to these new and exciting developments and treatments to people who live in remote regions. It's going to take ingenuity, and I'm looking forward to it, but it's an ongoing challenge.
Great, thank you. Let's turn to a few audience questions now. We're running good on time, which is great. A couple of comments. The first is a bravo to Dr. Leahy, acknowledging consistent messaging with your brain health navigator. And the second was saying it would be great to see Dr. Singer's care pathway with that helps with decision making. And if there's words you want to share about that, it sounds like something for sure seeing is better than discussing, but if there's any other follow-up discussion about that, I certainly welcome that as well.
I can share that with people. We can do that by email. I can
Sure, if you
send
send it to us,
Crystal or
we'll
to
get,
you, Jennifer, either
yep,
way.
if you send that to me, we'll get that right out to people. Thank you very much. And we'll share it on our site as well.
I can also share our consent forms, which is probably a lot more information than you want, but could serve as a model.
Great, thank you. We've been, a question from the audience. We've been hearing a number of questions and concerns from patients and families regarding the anti-amyloid therapies. Do you have or have you considered developing or are aware of an FAQ sheet or similar resource, that addresses common concerns so patient and caregivers can have consistent, reliable information? So any patient resources that you have or are aware of that you might want to recommend?
Yeah, in our clinic, when people are considering anti-amyloid therapies, we have some general information that we have collected in a book. And we give that to patients at time of diagnosis. So there's some information about Alzheimer's in general, and then about the FDA-approved treatments, and then some like local resources and numbers. When someone goes on anti-amyloid therapies, we have a sheet that they get at every single infusion. And it has some numbers on it, but it also has things like if you were to have an infusion-related reaction or these symptoms at home, there are some things that you could take at home, the on-call doctor's number, the most common symptoms of ARIA, and what to do if you have any of those symptoms. So that is something that they get each time. And, at the first appointment when we're talking about the therapies, in addition to those things, I take some handwritten notes for the patient as I talk about it, because there are some numbers that I'll throw out and things. And so they leave with some notes that I've written for them so they can just listen and don't have to, frantically write some of these things down too, because that is a lot of information at the first appointment. It's too much information to try to make any particular decisions on either. We just deliver that information, which is really delivering the hope after a diagnosis at that appointment. So those are the resources that we use.
I'm going to steal some of those ideas from you, Dr. Leahy. That's great. Our consent form includes a preamble for education with information from the clinical trials. I think I overdid it in the beginning because I really was approaching this as a clinical trial, and those consent forms are very detailed. And so I think our consent form is overly detailed. So if you request a copy from me and receive it, you're going to want to edit it down, and I should do the same to make it briefer, but at least all the information is in there. And there is sort of an executive summary in the beginning. So I like the idea of reinforcing that information at each time they have an infusion. I think that's great, especially reminding them what the symptoms of ARIA or other side effects are, infusion reactions and so forth. That's a really good one. We're going to adopt that. So we're still learning, and speaking with other practitioners doing this is always helpful.
Great. And what about the impact on patients? So when you talk about, we had a question, are you seeing benefits in your patients? So I'd kind of expand that question to talk about not only, functional and cognitive benefits, but psychosocial benefits and maybe even family benefits as far as marital. I've heard some patients share with me, this has really been positive for my wife and I to give us hope and things along that line. So I'd just love to hear kind of your reflections on what you bringing this to your communities means for the people that you treat. And Dr. Singer, I'll start with you.
It's such a fascinating question. We try to dampen any expectation of improvement because we really don't expect people to improve. we're really just saying the expectation is a slowed rate of decline, and you don't really know what would have happened without the treatment, so you really don't know how effective the treatment is. We can, go by PET imaging to see if it's doing what it's supposed to do, but we know it will. We just don't know for sure how much benefit in the real world that would provide you, but we go with the research data suggesting that, which tells us that it will slow your rate of decline. That being said, anecdotally, there's a lot of people reporting improvement. It's not the expectation. Could be placebo effect. It could be the effects of improved mood and hopefulness that these treatments provide. We don't know. There could indeed be some people who actually improve. We know that there's natural variation. Symptoms wax, symptoms wane, very sensitive to other influences of brain function. So there's going to be some people who improve, and whether that's the treatment or not, we don't know. We might know over time. That's one reason why these registries are so valuable, because we'll be able to see real world experience. Anecdotally also, I heard at AAIC in Toronto last month that people are having fewer side effects than we expected. I would say that's true of my cohort so far.
Right.
So generally positive.
And how about you, Dr. Leahy?
I always say the research speaks for itself, right? The science speaks for itself with these medications. I think the question of do anti-amyloid therapies slow cognitive decline has been answered. They do. I think that was the question we were wondering in 2023, and that's been answered. I think these are a part of the treatment for Alzheimer's. I think they're going to stay a part of it. I think we're going to add some things on and get better over time, right? Anecdotally, as Dr. Singer said, I think patients do better on these treatments than off. And that's because for 10 years, I saw every Alzheimer's patient every 6 months, and I essentially documented their decline. And when I see patients now on anti-amyloid therapies, sometimes they don't get worse. And sometimes that goes on for a while. My patients that have been on medication, some of them now for the longest 2 years, quite a few of them 18 months. And now I'm no longer surprised if someone who's on an anti-amyloid therapy has not changed much, because I see that now. So I think, the anecdotally, we are seeing that. And of course, that is so hopeful, and we're so excited about that. I also see, as Dr. Singer said, patients will say they feel better. And I always say, that's so great. I'm so happy. We were really hoping that this would slow it down, but if you're feeling better, I'm so glad, right? And I truly really sure exactly what that is. It certainly could be, as Dr. Singer has said, but there are also even some indications, even some of the research and data, that there are a portion of patients that report getting better. And we'll have to see how that plays out the next few years. Hopefully we have better answers for why that is. But I think that is the exciting thing. I think the questions for 2026 are, how do we expand access? How do we make sure that everybody has an option for this treatment? How do we spread the excitement of this and the confidence in providers that are willing to start prescribing these medications? How do we support them in starting to prescribe these medications? And that's taking really to primary care doctors and incorporating them and making sure that they understand how very important they are in the success of the treatment of Alzheimer's. And that is getting that initial early referral to neurology.
Terrific. Thank you. One of our audience members is curious about some questions with the infusion centers, whether they're part of your practice, if not, how close they are to your practice, whether patients have options in your areas for them, and then if there's how long the appointments are, and whether there's barriers or long waits or things to get those infusions. So a whole lot of questions, just experience with infusion centers, I guess we can say. Dr. Singer, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so we were approached early on by a local company, actually literally called Local Infusion, that has offices throughout Maine and New Hampshire. These are storefront infusion centers. They look like medical spas. We were really impressed with how well prepared they were to administer this treatment, how knowledgeable they were already. They had done a lot of background work on it. So we have been using local infusion, and because there's several of them, people who live far away can go to one of the other local infusion centers, but there is one in our town. Patients love it. They have private rooms. They get treated really well. Snacks, a lot of attention. Nurses are great. Communication is excellent, but communication still occurs by fax, and email and phone calls. The infusion center at our cancer center started knocking on our door and saying, "Hey, send patients to us. We're ready for this." And they did a lot of work to get ready. And there were some advantages to using our own internal infusion center. The pharmacists keep track of the imaging, and communication can be a little more efficient. So we make decisions based on geography now, whichever one is closer. But we have been impressed with this private company that's separate from us. But we use them both.
Great. And how about you, Dr. Leahy? What's your experiences there?
Well, I'm lucky to have an infusion center that is connected to the building where I practice, and it's part of our health system, which means that they use the same electronic medical record. And as if I don't, I highly recommend to patients that they start their infusions at that infusion center. And I'm scolded by the brain health navigator, who understands how very important it is to have patients using the same, or to have the infusion center using the same electronic medical record as we do, so we can communicate with them. And we can communicate with the infusion nurses, and they can directly do that with us. So what we try to do is to start every patient here in the times when the risks of ARIA are the highest, in the first 3 to 6 months, and then try to find an infusion center after that is as close to home as possible, when we know they're doing well on the therapy, when we don't have to worry about those infusion-related reactions with the first few infusions. So that is generally what we do. There are some cases where people live so far away that we've realized that it's just not possible for someone to drive 3 or 4 hours to our infusion center, and we deviate from that. But that has been something that has been particularly very helpful for the navigation of these patients, to keep everything in-house, including, as Dr. Singer had said too, MRIs here as well, so that I can look at the images in addition to getting that report, communicate directly with the infusion nurses and the brain health navigator. So that's been a really big part of that, I think, and really the safety piece of it as well, that we all know what each other are doing, and we see that being a much more difficult when people are living farther out. And like I said, that sometimes has to occur, but in the situation like that, we have a really frank discussion with the family, is that we need people to really be organized, and these are the things we're going to need you to do. And that is sometimes sending us a CD with the MRI images so that they can be reviewed and things like that. So if it goes outside of the health system, there are just some things that we have to make sure that the family understands is going to be more of their responsibility, to make sure that is all happening, and that their loved one's safe.
Great.
As for time, duration of the infusion, that was part of the question too, I think. Lecanemab is an hour-long infusion, and donanemab is a half an hour-long infusion. Lecanemab is an hour every 2 weeks, and donanemab is about half an hour monthly.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned snowbirds earlier, and I'm from the north too, so we have snowbirds around here as well. And so tell me about your experiences with how do you help set that patient up for success as they are, heading south for the winter. What are some things you do, Dr. Leahy?
Yeah, so I have found most people from Michigan go to Florida. Not too many people go to Arizona. So we have certain infusion centers that we've now started to work with, and we know around the state, and some independent infusion centers that are in multiple cities, and that we know that they know these infusions, they know how to do that. We know they have good communication with us. So we prefer to use those infusion centers. But it is a lot. I mean, it's a lot to get people restarted down at the state, especially because authorizations oftentimes need to be redone when someone moves to a different state and they're getting infusions in a different state. So that's a delay. And I think, patients just understanding the expectations for care, that it may be delayed if you're going to that new infusion center, because they're going to have to get a new authorization for the infusion. So that's kind of just setting up expectations for that. Everybody thinks that it's just going to be this easy, seamless process that transfers from one to the other, but it really, in reality, there is some delay usually when that occurs, even in an infusion center that has been doing this for a while, and that's more on the authorization side than anything. But yeah, I think that's one of the things. We really try to use the same centers around in the Florida area, and there are a number of them now that we use.
Great. How about you, Dr. Singer?
Yeah, I would say the same. We don't have our process perfected yet with that. So far, a lot of people have even agreed to stay the winter. We sort of time it so that there may only be, if treatment is for 18 months, say with donanemab, they may only have to stay one winter with us or go to Florida for a month and then come back for treatment, maybe go back to Florida, come back. So it's individualized. Makes us very nervous though, because of the requirement to get new drug approval and work out the protocol and communication. It's complicated, but we understand that people don't want to spend winters with us.
I'm curious about technology, and one of our guests asked specifically about use of telehealth or any remote patient monitoring or anything. Is there anything that you've implemented in the rural areas that might, or things that you're aware of going on in rural areas in this treatment realm that have helped to enable patients to receive care? Dr. Singer, do you want to?
Well, we really developed a robust telehealth program during the pandemic. We still do some clinic visits for people who live far away remotely. I don't feel comfortable initiating treatment for people over telehealth. I want to see them directly and examine them directly and do our on-site assessments particularly. So definitely for the initial visits, I don't think telehealth is adequate. For some follow-up care, it could be integrated, and we do that. But people need to be seen periodically on site.
Dr. Leahy, any thoughts?
Yeah. So I do televisits sometimes. I agree with Dr. Singer. It's really hard at the beginning. First, I think that having these conversations face to face, there's a lot of things that we're reading into when we're sitting there in front of a patient, body language, watching other family members react to different things we're saying. That's really key in understanding if it's appropriate. So I think that some of those initial discussions, plus I hate to give a diagnosis of Alzheimer's over a televisit, so that's kind of sometimes wrapped up into those appointments. So, the first few appointments, much better if we can do those in person, and we generally do. I have done some televisits when patients are on anti-amyloid therapies past the 6 months, and we're checking in with them, and they're on they're doing well, and we're just checking in with them. But yeah, it's a little bit trickier with the anti-amyloids. And I think that's maybe even just, my concern and my control maybe is that I just want to make sure everything's okay and do that full neurologic exam and make sure that we're not missing anything. And that really kind of goes to the whole idea of what we started with, is if we're going to offer these therapies, we need to make sure that they are done as safely as they possibly can be done. And that neurologic exam and face-to-face interaction is important to that. So, there is a role for telehealth. I absolutely think so. And that certainly would help with access, but maybe at certain times with some more face-to-face interaction needed too.
Great. And in a similar vein, an attendee's asking about the EM, the electronic medical records, and whether there's an alert for like an ED triage nurse or something along that line that the folks are receiving these therapies. And Dr. Singer, I know you've done some education for your ED colleagues as well around these. So anything you can speak to about that around the patient safety and using the electronic medical record?
Good point. It's a work in progress. We've done education, but we haven't yet embedded any alerts in the electronic record. That's something we have to work on.
How about you, Dr. Leahy?
Yeah, so one, it is on, of course, the patient's medication list when they come into the emergency department, so that's there. We do have a special indicator that we can add in now that is a place where the emergency medicine physicians will look for certain things, and we kind of talk to them about if we have certain, the words donanemab or lecanemab on there, that's certainly what these are, and that we're worried about mostly a TPA or anticoagulant, them starting anticoagulants. We also, have cards that patients will keep in their wallets, and even rubber bracelets that say they're on the anti-amyloid therapy and caution with blood thinners. So some other things, some different layers, I think that it's just a lot of different layers. Education to family members is probably one of the most important layers in that, is that your caregiver or family member is going to come with you, and they're alerting people that we have to be careful with that. We've stopped a couple of patients from getting anticoagulants because a family member said, "Wait, is that a blood thinner?" And then so there are lots of different layers that are needed. EMR is certainly one that would be ideal. I don't think that it's a foolproof system though, and that we have to have some of these other things in place as well. At least not in our system with our EMR.
Yeah.
One attendee's asking about, you mentioned 18 months of therapy, but is there the opportunity to then extend that therapy beyond 18 months?
I think data were presented at AAIC. Did you see those, Kara? I think 3-year data for lecanemab, and I think we have 2-year data for donanemab, I believe, that show ongoing benefit. I'm not thoroughly convinced by those data yet. I think if you have a scan, the amyloid PET scan that looks free and clear, I'd be very tempted to stop treatment. But I'm going to wait and see, await more data on that. I'm a little suspicious about pharmaceutical funded trials showing that these are lifelong treatments. I think we need a little skepticism about that. But as we see more data accumulating, I might change my mind. But right now, I'll be doing amyloid PET scans at the 18-month mark and having a conversation with people about what the data suggest and whether to continue.
How about you, Dr. Leahy? Anything to add?
Yeah, so, you can have geriatricians and neurologists sit around a table and we can debate and argue this for hours. We love it. And the truth is we're all still learning together, and there's some information out there, but we're all trying to take the information that's in the research and turn that into clinical practice, and what are we actually saying to our patients. And I think that the key is just to be really honest with patients. The educational piece for a patient going on anti-amyloid therapy starts the moment you give them a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And you're adding additional information at each step of the way, so that when you get to these really hard decisions, like should we stop therapy or we should continue, they really have the background to help participate in that shared decision making, right? And these are the things that I find are super important then to have that discussion with families. And and what is right for just the individual patient, where they're at, how they're feeling about the therapies in general. Gosh, even insurance comes into play as we're talking about what to do long term. So as far as the science of it, yeah, Dr. Singer's right. We got a lot to figure out there. But it's really just what makes sense for that individual patient and where they're at in the disease, how they're feeling about the therapies, and the psychology of it, of some people wanting to stop therapy and some people wanting to continue. I certainly feel like there are roles for both in different scenarios.
It's interesting. People get really used to the routine of going to the infusion center. They like the staff there. They like the idea, the feeling that they're doing something actively, proactively for their disease. So there's an emotional component to discontinuation as well that has to be discussed.
Well, I want to again extend my sincere thanks on behalf of GSA and the Alzheimer's Association and for joining us today. And many thanks to Lily for supporting this whole series of 3 that are available on GSA Enrich. Dr. Leahy, Dr. Singer, thank you for your wonderful work and your passion for bringing these treatments to your communities. And I look forward to continuing the conversation in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.